Parshas Achrei, want to share with you a fascinating idea from the Sefer, built upon the Sefer Aznayim Torah of Rav Zalman Sorotzkin, on the topic of the terrible thing to be mekatrig on Klal Yisrael, to speak badly about the Jewish people, and at the same time the parameters about that and the importance of giving tochach and rebuke when appropriate. So one of the main topics in this week's parsha is the avoid of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, as the parsha starts off with. And the pasuk tells us, Perek Tezayin, pasuk Dalet is talking about Basonis Bat Kodesh Yilbash, Umichnesei Bad Yiyol Besaro, and then in Bad Yachkov it's the Bad Yitznov, that he puts on specifically the white begadim, the Kohen Gadol wears when he goes into the Kodesh Kedoshim, and he does not wear any of the golden cloth begadim. He only wears the white begadim. Rashi brings from Chazal. Chazal explains how come normally he serves a whole year with 8 begadim. How come he only wears 4 in the Kodesh Kedoshim? Because in kategor nasa sanegor, because the gold is reminiscent of the Chet Haegel, and a prosecutor is not the best defense. You don't come in with something which is reminiscent of the Chet Haegel when you're trying to defend before Hakadosh Baruch Hu and the Kodesh Kedoshim on Yom Kippur. So Rav Sorotzkin asked the question, if we're worried about this argument, I mean, that it's not a good way to invoke mercy before Hashem, to come in golden clothing, so then how come in the whole avodah of Yom Kippur, the whole thing is about trying to bring about rachamim before Hakadosh Baruch Hu, and the whole avodah in the Kodesh, the Kohen Gadol wears gold, and he takes it off when he goes into the Kodesh Kedoshim. If we're worried about gold invoking this, so why isn't it a concern outside of the Kodesh Kedoshim as well? So Rav Sorotzkin explains that people have this misnomer about what it means not to be mekatrig on Klal Yisrael, that people, they quote, he says, Ohavei Yisrael, they call themselves. He says, Hashem should say, all of them, they say, can never say a bad word to the Jewish people. Whenever anybody gives mussar to anybody, whenever anybody rebukes about the breaches in the generation, they quote Rav Levi Yitzchak Berditchev, and they say, you're always supposed to twist everything to find the good for the Jewish people. You're always supposed to find the positive in everything. You never speak bad about the Jewish people. And these people, they would erase the whole mitzvah of tochacha. But we know there is a mitzvah of tochacha. We know one of our jobs in this world, we're responsible to bring all our fellow Jewish brothers back to Hakadosh Baruch Hu. Of course we have to fight breaches in the generation. Of course we have to approach even individuals that we have a relationship with and try to bring them back to Hakadosh Baruch Hu. So what's the idea? The idea is that when a person, depends on who you're speaking to, and your relationship with other people, you have a responsibility towards them to try to guide them in the proper path. In your relationship with Hakadosh Baruch Hu, though, there's no place for anything more than to try to find schusim for Klal Yisrael. That's what Levi Yitzchak Berditchev was about when he spoke to Hakadosh Baruch Hu in davening. No matter what Klal Yisrael was doing, always trying to find the schus this way and that way, always trying to find a way to spin it towards the positive, because that's what Hakadosh Baruch Hu wants from us. And that's what's going on here by the avodah of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur. When he comes in the Kodesh, he's before the Jewish people. So then there's even this element of, if he's wearing the gold, and maybe it'll remind him of the Chet Haegel, and it'll inspire the people, we have what to feel guilty about, we have what to be ashamed of, we have what to do tshuva about. I think I've seen such an idea that the gold, in fact, does serve that purpose in the Mishkan to a certain degree. When he comes into the Kodesh Kedoshim, he's coming with v'fnim. Nobody else is allowed to enter. So it's just the Kohen Gadol and the Hakadosh Baruch Hu. So then there's no place for anything that could even remotely be mekatrig on Klal Yisrael. It's cool just trying to be mevakesh rachamim and find schusim before Hakadosh Baruch Hu. But it depends on who we're speaking to. And we find this idea of not being mekatrig on Klal Yisrael is all over Chazal. The Shmir Salashon and Shar Tvuna Perek Zayin has a whole chapter about it. It's a pasuk in Mishlei. Al talshin eved el adonov. Do not speak bad about the servant to the master. Dor aviv yikal imo yavarich. Even if it's a nation that the Gemara explains the pasuk means, even if it's a nation cursing its father, not refusing to bless its mother, even such a generation that treats Hakadosh Baruch Hu improperly, al talshin eved el adonov. Do not speak badly about the servant to the master. One example in the Gemara is Yeshayahu Hanavi, that we find in Daf Mem Testament Beis in Yevamis. The Gemara says that Yeshayahu Hanavi was killed by his was his nephew Menashe. And the Gemara says, fascinating story where he used Kabbalah to hide himself in a tree, but he wasn't able to fully hide his tzitzis showed, and he was in fact killed by Menashe's men. And the Gemara says, what was the reason why he deserved to be killed in this way? Because Yeshaya Hanavi says, Oili kinid mesi, ki ish tmeis vasayim anochi, b'toch avon tmeis vasayim anochi yoshev. Because he bemoans, he says, why am I worthy of having nevuah if I'm tamei of speech, and I'm in a people who are tamei of speech? So over here, this is not a rebuke to Klal Yisrael. This is just him bemoaning. He's saying, why am I worthy? So it's not his intention even to besmirch Klal Yisrael, points out the Chafetz Chaim, but even so, he's punished for this. So they asked the question on this Gemara. He said a lot worse to the Jewish people than people who are Tmeis Fasayim. So they explained the Gemara because it depends who he's talking to. When he's giving rebuke to Klal Yisrael, he gives fire and brimstone rebuke. But when he's just speaking between him and Hakadosh Baruch Hu, all Hashem wants to hear is chusim for the Jewish people. Doesn't want to hear any besmirching of the Jewish people. We find this by Eliyahu Hanavi as well. In fact, after the story with the Baal, the wicked queen Yezebel had killed many Nevi'im, and she was now trying to kill Eliyahu again after this story. And Eliyahu comes before Hakadosh Baruch Hu in Parag Yud Tes and Malachim Aleph, and he says to Hakadosh Baruch Hu, Kano Kinesi Hashem, I've been vengeful for Hashem, Ki Azvu Brischa Bnei Yisrael. Bnei Yisrael have deserted your bris milah, as they've destroyed your mizbechos, they've killed your Nevi'im, and I'm the only one left, and now they're trying to destroy me as well. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Eliyahu, let's take 40 days off. And Eliyahu comes back and he says the same thing again. And Hashem says to him, okay, now we're going to move on to Elisha. You're going to anoint him. Because Hashem says, the way Rashi explains it, in Pasuk Tazayin, if you're prosecuting my children, I don't need your nevuah. You won't be the leader of the Jewish people anymore. Move on to Elisha Hanavi. Obviously, Eliyahu Hanavi, in his, one of the greatest Nevi'im we've ever had, and his critique is quite justified. And Hashem says, you're not speaking to Klal Yisrael, you're speaking to me. I only want to hear positive about Klal Yisrael. I've heard, I can't find it again, but I've heard the pshat, why does Eliyahu Hanavi come to every bris? So I know there is a positive pshat, but there's a pshat like this, that because he said that as Ki Azvu Bris, because they've deserted your bris, Hashem says, you want to say Klal Yisrael deserted the bris, you're going to go to every single bris, and you're going to be a witness to see by every bris that Klal Yisrael, in fact, does keep my bris. This Hashem's love for Klal Yisrael, how much we have to think 10 times before we besmirch Klal Yisrael. If a person has a purpose of giving rebuke, then that's one thing. But just to be one of the bashers, to appreciate what it means that Hakadosh Baruch Hu judges a Navi who says before him bad things about Klal Yisrael and doesn't spin things in a positive way. And Chas Hashem, if we would ever daven before Hakadosh Baruch Hu and say any of the critiques, the rightful critiques that we have, that's not the way that we speak before Hakadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem wants to hear positive about Klal Yisrael. And at the same time, there is a place for rebuke when we deal with people. It's not something we can't be naive and say that there's nothing that people need to work on. Close with a beautiful story about the Satmar Rebbe. Many people, when I was telling them about this Torah, they mentioned the story to me. That there's a famous story that somebody critiqued the Satmar Rebbe. He says, Rebbe, you go around bashing people who are following in the paths of Zionism, and yet we find Avram Avinu davened hard for the people of Sodom, and you're even the fellow Jews, and you're critiquing them. And the Rebbe said, the Torah only tells us what Avram Avinu said before HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It doesn't tell us how Avram Avinu spoke to the people of Sodom. And you only know what I'm saying to the Zionists. You don't know what I say before HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Just highlighting again this idea that it depends who we're speaking to. It depends which relationship we're in at the time, how we should view and present. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu help us do this in a successful way. Wishing you a wonderful Shabbos.